Hi, this is Jeff Littorno. Talked to you a few times now about my books. Today I'm talking about my newest book, The Most Uncommon Cold 1, Life in the Time of Zombies, the first book in a series. I am writing the second one right now. Well, not right now, but when I'm not online. And I'm really enjoying writing a sequel because I haven't done it before, and it's nice just to jump right into the action without having to give a lot of background and character development. You just jump right back into the action, so I'm enjoying that. It's going quickly. I'm still pushing the first book because I'm trying to get people interested so that get in on the first one and hopefully want to keep going with it. I'm just noticing right now my wife is watching me back here. My wife Gail and myself. I was a teacher in Korea, teaching overseas for about 10 years, most of the time in Korea, and that's when I was young and hairless. We got married over in Korea, and since then I've gotten the gray and the beard. So enough about me. Um, my new book is about zombies, which zombies are very popular right now, as I'm sure you know. Zombies are the new vampires. Yeah, my books don't have any sparkly zombies or anything, so you don't have to worry about that. Um, but they are a little bit different. I think my zombies are more along the lines of, say, 28 weeks later. Those kind of zombies where they're not the shuffling along, mindless type zombies that they're in a lot of like George Romero, Night of the Living Dead, those type of zombies. These zombies have some thought. They don't really know they're zombies. Um, and I think it's interesting. I'm getting good reviews for this book. A lot of people, not a lot of people, but a few people, enough to make me blush, have compared it to Stephen King type character development and just making the reader really feel they're part of the action, which is a big compliment. So I'm enjoying that. I'm going to read you a little bit of the excerpt from the book. It's kind of one of the exciting parts, and hopefully get you interested. Um, excuse my reading, which isn't always the best, but we'll give it a shot. Here we go. There was a sort of scratching sound coming from the other side of the garage. It was easy to find the exact source of the sound since there was a trail left, as if something had been dragged from the puddle of blood. It looked just like skid marks left by tires. That is, except for the color was red. My eyes reflexively followed the path. Whether it was simple curiosity or something more, I was immediately enthralled by that path of smeared blood and following wherever it led. My feet carried me forward as though someone else was controlling them. I cannot say exactly how long the journey across the room took, or the precise manner in which I completed the journey. All I know is that I found myself coming to the full consciousness as I stared at the source of the scratching sound. In the corner In the corner of the room, in a crouch holding something bloody with both hands in front of her, was Bonnie. Her eyes were downward, fixed on the thing in her hands, so we did not make eye contact at first. I stood there at the end of the last row of cars watching her. She was still wearing her old bathrobe and one fuzzy pink slipper. The difference now was that the blood soaked her clothes. She continued to fidget with the bloody thing in her hands. From where I stood, I could not tell what she was looking at or what she was holding. Oh, excuse me, I messed up here. Okay. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Hold on just 1 second. It's a minor inconvenience, and we'll be right back to the story in just a moment. Talk among yourselves for just a second. I'll be right back. Like someone sneaking up so as not to scare away a wild animal, I inched closer, slowly closer to the corner where my wife was crouched. Both my sight and Bonnie's became absorbed by the thing in her hands. In fact, I was concentrating so intently that I did not immediately notice that Bonnie was no longer gazing at her hands. Her eyes were now raised toward me. But they were not the deep blue eyes I had come to know. These eyes were pale, as though the color had been washed out, and they were without the spark of life that had always shone in them. "She needed a ride to the drugstore," Bonnie muttered. "Who?" I asked as I moved closer to her. "Who needed a ride to the drugstore, Bonnie?" My words seemed to startle her, as if she had not seen me. Her head tilted slightly as she looked right through me. "She needed a ride to the drugstore," she repeated quietly. I thought that she must be in some kind of shock. Given the events of the day, that would be certainly understandable. I reached out to touch her shoulder and try to comfort her. At the instant I made contact with her, I realized that I had made a mistake. Her lips curled into a sort of snarl, revealing a mouthful of bloody teeth, with something stringy stuck in between. I immediately backed away from her. "She needed a ride to the drugstore!" She was now shouting with fury as she stood and spun toward me. I caught a better look of what she was holding. The sight made me gag. In her hands was the head of a young woman with long blonde hair. The stringy blood-soaked hair covered part of her face, but it was clear that a large chunk had been bitten out of her cheek, and her nose was missing. The thought that I had seen this face before heightened my disgust. "Bonnie, what happened?" I asked, even as my feet were moving away from her. She continued to stare blankly for several seconds before repeating, "She needed a ride to the drugstore." Bonnie took a step toward me and let the head fall to the floor of the garage. There was a soft thump, like an overripe pumpkin landing. At the sound, she turned her focus to the floor. With surprising speed, she dropped to a squatting position and scooped up the head. To my utter horror, she put her face down and took a bite out of the head. My legs went weak, and I felt like someone had forcibly punched me in the chest. I stumbled backwards for several feet. Suddenly reflexes kicked in, and I found myself running away from the scene. The sight of the Jeep offered an opportunity for sanctuary. I grabbed the keys from my pocket and pressed the button to unlock the car. I managed to get the door open quickly and lunged into the driver's seat. The click of the lock sounded louder and more final than ever as I pushed the button to lock all the doors. As I sat there staring out through the windshield, my breathing began to slow, as did my racing heart. I watched the thing that in some ways resembled my wife. It had the same height and hair and skin, but that was all. As the thing raised its face to look in my direction, I saw its cold, dead eyes, and knew with all certainty it was not Bonnie. In those eyes there were no memories of days we spent, trips we had taken, love we had shared, and pain we had caused. No matter how much this thing resembled my wife, it was not her. I was surprised by the anger I felt welling up inside. The thing which somehow had the audacity to impersonate Bonnie became the focal point of all the disgust and horror and fury I had felt during the day. I had never been so overcome by rage. I started the car. At the sound of the engine, the thing looked toward the Jeep. As I revved the engine, the Bonnie thing stood up and began slowly moving toward the car. Its face was now entirely covered with blood and bits of something darker. Even as it moved, it was clear the thing was not actually thinking about what it was doing. More like sleepwalking. No, that is not right. Not sleepwalking. It was thinking, but more like an animal than a human. It reacted to the sound of the engine and simply began moving toward it. It was more or less the same thinking of a moth as it is drawn to a flame. The Bonnie thing stepped unsteadily toward me. I continued to rev the engine, and the roar echoed through the garage. Then it began running toward me through the row of cars. I watched without emotion. It was something just happening outside the car. It felt outside of my world. My hand floated to the center of the console of the Jeep and to the handle of the gear shift. The Bonnie thing slapped the hood of the car on the passenger side and began moving toward me. When it reached the middle of the hood, I pushed the gas pedal all the way to the floor and slid the gear shift from P to D. Okay, that's enough. Hopefully, you're still awake, and hopefully that was enough to pique your interest. Again, the book is The Most Uncommon Cold One, Life in the Time of Zombies, by me, Jeffrey Littorno. There's even a nice picture of me here on the back, in case you want to know who wrote it. It's right there. And this is available on Amazon or through CreateSpace, wherever good books are sold. I hope you'll look into it, and I'll keep writing. And I'll probably talk to you again. I hope so. Take care. Bye-bye.